The 2020-21 NBA season starts tonight with two games. Kevin Durant returns to Golden State to face off with the team he won his two NBA championships with, the Golden State Warriors. Steph Curry will be back in action, and this one should be good. And what about the other game? The defending champions Los Angeles Lakers will face off against the LA Clippers. Fun matchups. We're barely 2 months removed from the last NBA season, and here we go again. As a basketball fan, this day is great for me, and I'm sure others have been waiting for it as well. But what can we realistically expect from each team this season? Hey guys, Purple Prince here. The NBA is back and so am I. And today, let's talk briefly about each team's outlook for the upcoming NBA season. Let's start with last year's bottom feeders, the Golden State Warriors. Wow, they were the worst team last NBA season. That was so unexpected. With Kevin Durant leaving the Warriors, we probably knew that they weren't those strong championship contenders anymore, but nobody expected them to be the worst team in the league. Me personally, I blame that on a bunch of injuries. Thompson was out, Green was hurt, Curry was hurt. The D'Angelo Russell experiment didn't work out and the result was bad. Now, Klay Thompson will still be out, but Steph Curry is back, a bunch of young guys gained some valuable experience last year, and they drafted a position they needed some help in. As ridiculous as it might sound, last year was very valuable for their future aspirations. Veteran players got some much needed time off, and young players could develop quicker with all those additional minutes and opportunities. It sucks that Klay got injured again, but they still have so much to offer this season. They should be a viable playoff team if everyone stays healthy. On the eastern side, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers. With only 19 wins last season, they were the worst team in the East. They've sucked every year without LeBron, and it's hard to see how it could be different this year. The most compelling thing to watch for is probably Colin Sexton's improvement. He's had some great offensive spurts, but he and the team in total with him on the court have been horrible on defense. They drafted a small forward from Auburn in Isaac Okoro, who could be a very good player down the line. Darius Garland was underwhelming last season, just too inconsistent, and who knows how long Kevin Love will be there. His All-Star days are probably behind him. Overall, nobody should expect the playoffs because they have a bunch of young guns who need to develop. Let's just hope that the Cavaliers can make up for some fun games this season. The second team from the West that didn't make the bubble last season was the Minnesota Timberwolves. Their season was also filled with a bunch of injuries and underwhelming performances. The difference this year, we hopefully will see a full season of Karl Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell together. Two good friends should have a great on-court chemistry. Add Anthony Edwards to the mix, who potentially is an all-star player in the making, and on paper you have a very intriguing season. I also would like to mention the return of Ricky Rubio to Minnesota. While he never be mistaken for an all-star, he is a very good point guard that distributes the ball, and he has played with Cat before, so it shouldn't take long for them to connect again. Timberwolves finally have some playmaking guards who can feed Cat in the post and make a play for themselves. Their bench gets dry pretty quickly though, and there's obviously a lot of question marks regarding how all of those all-stars plus their #1 draft pick will fit together. So likely, in the loaded West, they won't make the playoffs, but if everything really clicks, it shouldn't be a surprise if they do. Now, Atlanta Hawks, as bad as they were last season, they should be much better this year. And yes, I know I had the same thoughts before last season, but this offseason they have really made some good moves. They hired Rajon Rondo, which should bring that championship credentials and extra help at the point guard spot. Danilo Gallinari and Bogdan Bogdanovic will provide some much needed help at shooting. And they still have that young core from last year. I do expect some time for everything to really mesh together, but when it does, it should be a fun team to follow, and they definitely should contend for a playoff spot in the East. Sadly, I can't say the same thing about the Detroit Pistons. When they traded for Blake Griffin, they still had Andre Drummond, and it seemed they could at least contend for a playoff spot. That didn't work out, and now they don't really have another direction but rebuild. They signed and traded Christian Wood, which was one of their best players, to Houston. They still have Griffin and Derrick Rose, who could account for some wins during the regular season, but most likely will be trade pieces for another contending team, especially Derrick Rose because of his friendlier contract. Otherwise, a bunch of young players waiting for some minutes and a chance to improve. Detroit probably won't get even close to the playoffs. Now, New Orleans Pelicans, that's a different story. They've had a bunch of changes that could possibly help them get closer to playoffs this year. First of all, they parted ways with their head coach Alvin Gentry and hired Stan Van Gundy. Secondly, they traded away a fan favorite in Drew Holiday, but got back Eric Bledsoe, George Hill, and a bunch of picks. As much as it hurts, it probably was the better deal for the future. They also added Steven Adams in a move that should help their interior defense, and they rewarded their all-star Brandon Ingram with a 5-year extension. They've ensured that Ingram is their cornerstone along with Zion Williamson. I will say that they won't make the playoffs just because there have been so many moving parts, and we're still waiting to see in what physical shape Zion could play himself into. That's a big key to this team. 10 players lost through trades or free agency, so not a lot of continuation there, but the team should be fun to watch as it was last season. Sacramento Kings? I don't know. What do you expect from them? Nothing much, I guess. Well, they did change their GM, which was long overdue. They did sign De'Aaron Fox to a max deal, which is also good. In other moves, they lost Bogdanovic for nothing, which is kinda bad, and they added Hassan Whiteside and Frank Kaminsky. That ensures some frontcourt depth, but not much else. They drafted Tyrese Halliburton for some guard depth, and they have some parts returning from last season. There's only two things I am looking forward for the Kings this season. Can De'Aaron Fox be an all-star, and can Marvin Bagley III finally be healthy and continue to develop? That's it, no playoffs. The New York Knicks, the Big Apple. The organization has decided to make some changes in the front office, and they have a new head coach in Tom Thibodeau, who has seen success before, but the roster just isn't good. It just isn't. Their frontcourt looks okay, but that's the thing, you can't win with just the frontcourt. And they even drafted at the power forward position in this year's draft by taking Obi Toppin, who is a good talent, but damn, on the frontcourt again. RJ Barrett probably is the player to watch this year, his development. Mitchell Robinson was good last year, he's definitely talented, and they got some depth in the form of Austin Rivers. Here's a question, do you remember Frank Ntilikina? Yeah, me neither. Sadly, it once again must be a season without the playoffs. The same type of vibe comes from the Chicago Bulls camp. Similar to Sacramento, they did change their front office and a head coach who is somewhat of a proven commodity in the NBA in Billy Donovan. Zach LaVine is still there, so they have their all-star. Kobe White was good last year, and this year he most likely will have to take on point guard duties, so we'll see if he can handle it. Wendell Carter Jr. is nothing to sneeze at, but big development has to come from Lauri Markkanen. He was quite disappointing last season. And how about drafting Patrick Williams, who didn't start even once in college at the number 4 spot? Yeah, that should give you much hope for this season. That's pretty much it. Not a lot of pieces to work with for Billy Donovan, but who knows, maybe they will be a fun team to watch. No playoffs though. Speaking of fun, what about the Charlotte Hornets? They predictably missed the playoffs last season after losing Kemba Walker, but they did have some good promising talents on the team, most notably Devon Graham. Now they added Gordon Hayward on a mega free agency deal, which I really hated, but I guess it made sense for them since they were looking for some leadership and they wanted Gordon Hayward a while back, and now it came true. I'm just not sure about that contract, but Hayward is still a good player. The biggest news though is that LaMelo Ball is now a Hornet. Drafted with the number 3 pick, he most likely will come off the bench, but so much media and drama now come to Charlotte with the addition of him to the team. LaMelo is a talented player, and I'm eager to see how he does at the NBA level. Could be shaky at the beginning, but I'm sure he'll do fine once the season is fully rolling. And they have some other good pieces in Miles Bridges and PJ Washington. I wouldn't call this a sleeper playoff team just yet, but hey, they could scrap for one of those final playoff spots. And let's stay in the East for one more team that didn't make the playoffs last year, the Washington Wizards. They decided to give up on John Wall and traded him to acquire Russell Westbrook from the Houston Rockets. I'm sure that's a welcome addition to the organization. I'm not sure how well is the fit though, but if anything else, it should be fun to watch. They brought back Bertans, who is their best shooter alongside Bradley Beal, and there's some talent at the bigs with Thomas Bryant, Mo Wagner, and Isaac Bonga. Rui Hachimura didn't impress in his rookie season, so maybe this season he'll be better as well. I can't really clearly see the team's division here. With Westbrook and Beal, they should win now, but the other parts on the roster don't warrant that. One thing is sure, they will battle for that playoff spot in the East, but if anyone is expecting a deep playoff run, it's likely not happening. Okay, back to the West, where we have the old San Antonio Spurs. The coach remains the same, which is okay with me since Greg Popovich is quite possibly the best NBA coach of all time. What can they accomplish? That's hard to predict. They missed the postseason for the first time in what seems like forever, and now they have pretty much the same team coming back. In the bubble, they showed a completely new playstyle with some 4-guard lineups and 1 big, and maybe that's the key this year, a new playing style. They drafted some guards and took care of their own bigs from last season. 3-point shooting will still be an issue since one of their highest paid players don't even attempt them, and who knows if Aldridge makes it out of this season as a Spur. He's been in trade rumors for years now. It is unusual to see the Spurs as a team that has to battle hard to even be close to making the playoffs, but it seems like a similar fate awaits the Spurs fans this year. Getting into the playoffs will be hard. Phoenix Suns. Now, that's a team I finally might start to watch. They were already much better last season with Monty Williams as the new head coach and finally a vision for the future. They were the best team in the play-in games for the bubble, and the Ricky Rubio addition last season worked wonders for Devin Booker. And now they replaced him with an upgrade, even at this point of his career, in Chris Paul. That's some leadership and the instant IQ of the game added to a young Suns team. DeAndre Ayton is good, Jay Crowder on the bench, and this looks like a viable playoff contender to me. Last season, Chris Paul showed what he can do with a young OKC team, and this year should be no different. I think the Suns make it to the playoffs this year. I really do. Memphis Grizzlies. Kinda bummed still that they didn't make the playoffs last season. They had a great chance to do so but failed miserably in the bubble by grabbing just 2 wins in 8 seeding games and then losing to Portland in the play-in games. Wasn't all their fault. Losing Jaren Jackson didn't help either. For this year, they still have so much young talent, starting with their point guard Ja Morant, who showed a huge promise last year. Dillon Brooks, Justice Winslow, Brandon Clark, and Jonas Valanciunas for that veteran big guy in the middle. The team looks very solid. It sucks that they will have to start the season without Jackson and Winslow, and that could ultimately derail their hopes of a playoff push, but I haven't seen so much young talent in Memphis for years. A real exciting future awaits the Grizzlies fans. Maybe just not this season as far as the playoff spot goes. Okay, now let's go to our playoff teams for last season. First, the Orlando Magic. They won't have a lot of new faces this upcoming season. If they do hope for a playoff spot, it will have to come from internal resources. Jonathan Isaac won't be there because of his injury. That's a big loss. They drafted Cole Anthony, who will replace DJ Augustine in the guard rotation, and Markelle Fultz is entering the last year of his rookie contract and has to show improvement. Vucevic is still in Orlando and will be their best player, and it remains to be seen if they find any use for their pick of a few years ago in Mo Bamba, who supposedly has impressed in workouts. I don't see a playoff spot this year though. Now, Brooklyn Nets should make the biggest jump this season. Last season was kind of a mess. Kevin Durant wasn't going to be there, Kyrie Irving struggled with injuries, and a lot of team chemistry that was so good a few years ago just wasn't there. This year, everyone seems to be healthy and the hopes are high. We'll have to see how Kevin Durant responds after missing so much time with his Achilles injury. So far he's looked good, but we'll have to rate him on a full spectrum of next season. Kyrie Irving made news not in a good way during the offseason, but with KD in the mix, his play should elevate. And you still have Joe Harris, one of the best 3-point shooters in the league, great rebounders in DeAndre Jordan and Jared Allen, the 6th man in Spencer Dinwiddie, and some depth with Jeff Green and Landry Shamet. Plus they have a new head coach in Steve Nash, who has no head coaching experience so far. Definitely an interesting team we should all follow this year. The hope is the NBA Finals and Championship. I don't think the Nets go that far, but making the playoffs as one of the top seeds if everyone stays healthy is a guarantee. The Philadelphia 76ers. They finally got rid of Brett Brown and added a coach with credentials in Doc Rivers. They also hired Daryl Morey, one of the best GMs in the league. So they will give it one more shot for that Simmons-Embiid combo. Or will they? The rumors are they could be trading Simmons for James Harden. Whether that happens or not, even with the current roster as it is, they should be a better team come this season. Doc Rivers is clearly a better coach than Brett Brown, and I like that they traded away Al Horford. That two-big system just wasn't working. In exchange, they brought in veteran shooters Seth Curry and Danny Green, Dwight Howard for some backup minutes at the 5 spot, so I really like what they have done. Now let's just see how it all fits together. A playoff team for sure. Let's quickly jump to the West, where we have the Portland Trail Blazers. The Blazers team also has had a quietly good offseason. They re-signed Rodney Hood and Carmelo Anthony, they replaced an aging Trevor Ariza with Robert Covington and Derrick Jones, and they brought Enes Kanter back to Portland. The problem last year was defense, and as it looks today, it should be better this season. Little at CJ McCollum will ensure fireworks on offense. It's that defensive side that will have to improve to really gain some ground early. Even if the defense doesn't make great improvements, I still think Portland makes the playoffs for sure. The Dallas Mavericks, another fun team. They will have to start the year without Porzingis. That's a big blow, but he'll be back. I didn't like the fact that they traded away Seth Curry, but I guess they got better on the defensive side, which was a struggle last year. Having Dwight Powell back from the injury will help. Tim Hardaway stays as that streaky shooter who can explode any game, but whatever happens, you still have Luka Doncic. This dude is just the real deal. He almost eliminated the Clippers by himself in last season's playoffs, and now, with a healthy Porzingis, hopefully they will surely be a playoff team. Not just this year, but for years to come. Not much change in Utah as far as the player roster goes, but they do seem to have all parts there ready. We know Donovan Mitchell will be there for a while, and so will Rudy Gobert, who both signed extensions with the teams. That's a good way to start. Bojan Bogdanovic missed the bubble, but he should be healthy this season. That's some great shooting that is well appreciated. And they have some good reserves in Jordan Clarkson, Joe Ingles, and Derek Favors. I am looking for Mike Conley though. Last season he started really slow. If he can revert to the Mike Conley from the Grizzlies days, the Jazz is a dangerous team that also will make the playoffs. OKC Thunder? Well, you're out of luck this year. They just completely cleaned the house, getting rid of all the veterans, and will continue their rebuild. Chris Paul is gone, Steven Adams and Dennis Schroeder also gone. This team just has a very young core and 18, yes you heard me right, 18 first round draft picks in the next 7 years. Al Horford, Trevor Ariza, yeah they might be there for the whole season, but they're more like short-term fillers for the roster. This team is building for the future, so no playoffs this season. And before we go back to the East, I just wanted to touch on the Houston Rockets. Wow. Maybe the most talked about team in the offseason besides the champs, and not in a good way. The Harden drama is hindering like a dark cloud about this team. Most likely, at some point Harden will be traded to another team. That obviously will mean a lot fewer expectations, but even with Harden, they shouldn't extend to championship contender. If we ignore all the Harden drama, this team looks ready for a fresh start. John Wall will be the team's new starting point guard. They added DeMarcus Cousins. The addition of Christian Wood is looking very solid so far, and new head coach in Stephen Silas, he will have his hands full coaching, I can tell you that much. It's really hard to predict what this team could accomplish until they resolve the Harden situation. With Harden, it's the playoffs, although all the drama might have a very big negative impact on the team. Without him, most likely not. I'll leave it at that. One is for sure, the Houston Rockets will be different this year, with or without Harden. Okay, back on the East Coast, where we have the last season's NBA finalists, the Miami Heat. Nobody expected them to make the finals last season, but they did, and in the process, Jimmy Butler showed how great of a leader he is, which was especially important after the way he left his previous organizations. Heat added Avery Bradley and Maurice Harkless from free agency, and they kept pretty much everyone they needed to keep from last season. Adebayo got an extension, well deserved by the way. More growth is expected from last season's rookies, so the Heat should be at the top of the Eastern Conference once again. They have a good mix of young players and veterans, and obviously a great front office behind them. Indiana Pacers will be seeking a new identity under a new head coach in Nate Bjorkgren. Much of the old roster has remained in place, and the hope here is that Oladipo returns to his all-star form. Domantas Sabonis was a good surprise last season, and he should continue to be great for the Pacers. TJ Warren was a revelation during the bubble, so he'll have to prove he's the real deal when it comes to a full season. I was a bit disappointed with Miles Turner last season, so he has to improve on both sides of the court. This team looks solid on the paper, but they'll have to up the pace a bit and start shooting some more three-pointers. They won't get far playing the old style of basketball, which is I guess why Nate McMillan was relieved of the head coaching duties. They should still be regarded as the upper echelon team in the East, so most likely a playoff team. The top 3 team in the East last season, the Boston Celtics, will look to improve on their last year's results. They have their superstar Jason Tatum, 2 stars in Jaylen Brown and Kemba Walker, and they made a good addition in free agency by getting Tristan Thompson. Always pesky Marcus Smart will be there, and Jeff Teague will provide some good depth at the point guard spot. The problem with Boston is the depth in other spots. Who are their reserves after first 6-7 guys? Semi Ojeleye and Grant Williams both averaged just 3.4 points per game last season. While the guard and wing depth is absolutely fine, they don't have the same amount of talent at their big spots. Will be in the playoffs, but most likely has to make an addition or two for depth purposes sometime during the season. The Toronto Raptors. First, big losses: Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol. They just don't have any depth now at the center spot. Kyle Lowry is a true leader of this team, and his backcourt mate Fred VanVleet is back on a 4-year deal. There's no doubt about this team's desire to win and that they'll battle hard, but depth could be an issue this year, and Pascal Siakam has to be better. He kinda underwhelmed in his first season as the Raptors' best player. Still a good team and always up for a fight. Nick Nurse really can coach, so you should definitely expect this team to be back in the playoffs again. And the Milwaukee Bucks. Kinda been the theme for the last few seasons. The Bucks get the best record, they have the MVP, and then in the playoffs they just fold. They made a big move by acquiring Jrue Holiday from the Pelicans, and maybe that was the move that led the Bucks to signing Giannis to an extension. Now they have their superstar in place for the foreseeable future, so it's just a question of how you build around him. Giannis himself has to get better in shooting the ball. If he's not a threat from the perimeter, it makes it just so much easier for the opposing team to try to eliminate him from getting to the basket and beating the Bucks. Depth could be an issue. Bobby Portis, DJ Augustine, Torrey Craig, that's cool, but what about some more wing players? Getting to the playoffs is a non-question, but with Miami back, Brooklyn in the mix, the Bucks might not have the best record in the East this season. And we have the 3 best teams from the West remaining, starting with the Denver Nuggets. One of the surprises from the last season, especially how they came back from 3-1 deficit and eliminated the Clippers in the playoffs. This season they won't have some key players from last season, especially defensively. They also lost some size during free agency. Well, size-wise they still have Bol, who's been impressive in practices. In the bubble, Jamal Murray proved that he can be that second star for the Nuggets. Now it's time for Michael Porter Jr. to do the same thing, and Denver is counting on it. They have great coaching and most of the best players from last season are still there. The improvement from Michael Porter Jr., in my opinion, is what separates this team from a playoff team and a championship contender. Oh, the LA Clippers. What an off-season for them. So much stuff coming out of the Clippers camp, mostly rumors, bad vibes, the lack of leadership, and so on. The new head coach Ty Lue will try to resolve those leadership questions. Paul George, I won't even rate him until the postseason comes because that's been his MO for years. Great in the regular season and crumbles under pressure in the biggest games. They lost Montrezl Harrell to the Lakers and that hurt, but they also added Serge Ibaka and Luke Kennard. They are still missing a point guard though. That little barking dog Patrick Beverley just isn't a good option at the point guard spot and should be a reserve. Lou Williams seems to be slipping a bit, especially in the bubble. Kawhi Leonard might hold a silent conference to calm everybody down, but this team needs a leader, and so far besides the head coach, I just don't see it. Playoffs, but the championship is not likely. They had to win it last year. Which brings us to the last team, the defending champions Los Angeles Lakers. Wow, what an offseason. They re-sign Anthony Davis, they re-sign LeBron James, they get the 2 best reserves in Montrezl Harrell and Dennis Schroeder. They do get a bit thinner at the center spot, but they did get Marc Gasol, who is a great passer at the center spot. They re-sign Kyle Kuzma, Markieff Morris, KCP, bring in Wesley Matthews, and strictly for locker room purposes, sign back Jared Dudley. Rob Pelinka is proving he is great at this team building thing, and not to mention Talen Horton-Tucker, that second round pick, is scoring 30 plus and stealing the ball from Kawhi. The Lakers are the big winners of this offseason and should be the definitive favorites to repeat next season as the NBA champions. The team will have to play differently because they have different pieces, and you probably won't see as many lobs or blocks, but they have a very deep team now. It almost seems unfair to have LeBron and AD and such a depth. My favorites to win the NBA chip once again. Okay, this was a long one, but God bless you if you stuck through the video to this point. Big thanks for watching the video. What are your thoughts on the upcoming NBA season? Which team do you think will win the championship? Which team improves? Which team disappoints? If you have any thoughts on this upcoming NBA season, don't hesitate to leave those thoughts in the comment section. I do hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll appreciate if you leave it a like and a subscribe for the channel. And if you're in a real Christmas mood, also enable that bell notification just to not miss my next video. Thanks for everything. This was Purple Prince, and I'm out.